the Armchair Prepper. So stay tuned, and we're going to look at the highlights and lowlights of this book. Like I keep saying, fire arson is going to be a major issue. I have seen people burning other people's houses, sometimes with people inside, just because they like that. They had an expression of joy and happiness on their faces. They did that and similar things when they realised that SHTF and there is nobody to punish them. They enjoyed it. This will be a minority, but it will be an active and aggressive minority. As I've said before, if you have a good social network and you're not in the middle of a big city, one of the things you need to do quite early on in SHTF, with the fall of society, is to identify the people that are going to rape, torture, burn and kill for giggles and take them out. However you wish to take them out. Again, remember, he was under siege in a city. One of the things that he noticed very early on was stench of garbage everywhere. Later on, there was the stench of burned bodies everywhere, and it was a horrible smell that is with him more than 20 years later. If you've ever smelt rotting bodies, you'll know what he's on about. And a lot of dead bodies in one place without much hygiene, without much water, without animals eating them very much, trapped under blown up buildings, that stench is going to be pretty bad. The stench alone is going to force relocation. Now what he doesn't mention in this book, and I want to get into Sarajevo in a separate video, is the fact that the people who bugged out rurally were actually easier to be found and gathered up and executed. The ones who really kind of survived from the ethnic groups under attack here mostly ended up in the cities and mostly saved themselves by being under siege in the cities. He points out he had many opportunities to see what was going to happen, and he could have left Yugoslavia. He did not. He did not believe that in the 20th century this would happen in a first world country. Well, it did. One of the things he says but doesn't say is acclimatization. For example, I'm an ICU nurse. I have no problems dealing with people who've got liquid feces all over themselves and dribbling out the bottom of the bed. Not like it. I can deal with it. No big deal. I know ICU nurses that can't deal with sputum, with phlegm. Really can't deal with it. I can't deal with eye injuries. I have a real hard time with eye injuries. What he recommends is you actually get used to the stuff in the now that you will find difficult to deal with in SHTF. And I think that's very true. There's a substantial number of preppers out there that are frightened of needles, they're frightened of blood, various whatever you're frightened of, heights, whatever, loud noises, dark spaces. Do some prep training now where you actually confront some of your fears in the now before you have to deal with them in SHTF. I think that's sound advice. We tend to prep to our strengths. We don't tend to prep to our weaknesses. What's the best gun for SHTF? He tells you. I have the best gun for SHTF because someone put a huge amount of money into marketing it. If most preppers look at their storage, they can find items they know the theory of using but never used it. That's very true. A lot of things are still in packets for me, I know that. The best gun for SHTF is one where you can get ammunition for it. The best gun for SHTF is one that you can go through urban homes with it easily. The best gun in SHTF is the one that you can use right-handed or left-handed, because when you're clearing buildings, and I never see people do this, when you're clearing buildings, as you go through the building, if you can actually move your gun from hand to hand, dominant to non-dominant, and still effectively sweep the room you're going into, you actually avoid, as he says, putting your body out as you're doing the sweep, right? So you want to be that, not this. I think that's an important thing. I really do. He also says a good gun is a gun that you can use without ammunition, as a club and also as a spear to tear people's faces apart just by shoving it as hard as you can into them. He talks a lot about knife fighting in this book, points out to people killing people with a knife is difficult, it's possible, that you have to use an awful lot of force, that just going bang 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 in the stomach's probably not going to kill them, that even if you cut somebody's carotid artery, if they're fairly strong because of the shock and fear thing, they may still grab you by the throat and actually kill you before they actually bleed out. Death is not usually bang bang. One of the guys who told him how to fight with a pistol said to him, have 2 magazines. When they run at you, boom 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 boom, just fire the full mag, reload and then fire the second mag. Sure, you can kill somebody with 1 or 2 bullets, bang bang, like the police are taught, but in SHTF where they're coming at you to kill you, kill them. This is why many preppers will die. Regular folks will run. But some preppers take so great a pride in their plan or equipment, they do not make the right decisions when it matters because of their ego. But if I see that my survival is in question, I'm ready to say F it to everything. Sometimes to survive means not to win, but to give up and wait for the next chance. Do not expect to be a winner all the time. This is also very true. When you get more experience as a survivalist and as a prepper, you may even become arrogant, and you can think you know what to deal with and can stay and wait. I've seen this on prepping forums a ton, and also online a lot. There's a lot of big names out there who are insufferable bores, not that smart, and I can think of numerous ways to take out their location. But they don't, because they have 4 or 5 guys who love them and they have weapons. But if you're living in a chipboard house with no food except stored food, don't expect to live. He talks about gun confiscation. It's no surprise to me. You guys can buy the book and read it yourself. It's not really a factor that I worry about. What he actually says in the book, it's a useful thing, is to make sure you have unregistered weaponry and unregistered ammunition in place where you have to register the ammo as well. Like, make sure that when they come for your guns, give them up, because the people that are coming for the guns are going to be very, very heavily armed. And if you don't give up the guns, they may just kill you. And it's never, in his opinion, worth dying over a principle. I think that's kind of an important topic. But again, you know what I mean? If you have unregistered weaponry, nobody's going to steal them, and you've still got weaponry. As he says, the good side of coming from a country that has no history of gun rights is that you've always got illegal guns hidden somewhere. You're used to that in your culture. You would no more think of registering a gun because you're not allowed to, but you have guns anyway. And as he says, there is no need to brag about that. He talks about the average day in SHTF, and again, I think a lot of preppers out there, a lot of the big channels as well, they really have never experienced operating in an SHTF environment. And he has, and I have. As I keep telling people, you know, if you're going to bug out, and it's not your house is on fire bug out situation, you decide to go to your bug out location, you really should be travelling at night. You really should not be travelling through major arteries. You should be cautious what you're doing. He says that for that reason, most of the activities they did were at night. But it was dangerous, but they felt safer because of the snipers by operating at night. Now, he had about more than 10 people in his home, and they had a schedule, so somebody was always alert and aware of what was going on 24/7, and that's a critical function as well. So if you are a lone wolf, figure out how you're actually going to stay awake for the rest of your life, because you do need to sleep. You're already going to be hungry, tired and stressed. Without adequate sleep, you're going to make mistakes, and mistakes in Grit Down will kill you. So like I said, this book's not going to give you how-to whatevers. He does mention food. He talks about pancakes, how they would use towards the end any sort of grass seed ground up to make flour that they had left expand further, and they would make pancakes, which were basically local picked greens. Dandelion leaves is about the extent for most people, and a little bit of flour. So, you know, if you've got some salt, if you've got some spices, if you've got some sugar, and you've got adequate amounts of flour stored by, you're going to be in a much better nutritional position than people who are literally starving. He talks about people eating wormy food with worms on it, and you just don't look at the food and eat it quickly. Yeah, if you can't cook it, then for sure. And if the food's got worms on it, but is otherwise only food you've got available, you are going to cook it. Now, I always say about botulism, make sure you heat the thing to boiling and keep it there for a minute to 2 minutes, preferably 5 minutes, and stir like crazy. Because botulism is a real thing. It never happened to him or his family or anybody in this book, and that would be typical for most tinned food. But once you get beyond the year mark in Grit Down, if you do come across food that's 10 years, 20 years out of date, really consider botulism. It is a definite risk factor, and if you are eating expired MREs, make sure you boil all of the food in the MRE packets, including the jelly, before you wolf it down, because botulism's horrible. So he talks about how in Grit Down, in SHTF, large armed groups could just come up to you and say, you are coming with us, and they would make you work for them for free, and you had no choice other than death. So hiding was the best thing to do. He also talks that a lot of the gangs started their own forms of informal prison. They started prostitution. Prostitution wasn't necessarily the woman's choice. Age didn't really come into it. Anybody over 14 was classified as an adult anyway in Grit Down very early on. And that some of the helpers from the United Nations actually would visit those incarceration units and you use the brothels inside them for women. People aren't that nice.